Good news, everyone. The climate crisis has been overblown the entire time. Yay! No. Don't look at the floods and fires raging around the world right now. Ignore the fact that the Arctic Circle just saw temperatures over 30 degrees Celsius for the longest streak since we started recording in 1961. All of these happening at once and getting worse every year is just the sun, or poor land management. Yes, CO2 is increasing by 2 parts per million every year, but that's a good thing because plants like CO2. There's clearly no such thing as too much of a good thing. Drown your plants in water because they love it, right? All of these statements are justifying the Trump administration's rollback of decades of environmental policies as presented by a new Department of Energy's National Climate Assessment called a Critical Review of Impacts of Greenhouse Gases on the US climate. Unlike previous assessments that were written over years by hundreds of scientists, the last one was written by more than 700 experts, this one was compiled in months by just 4 scientists and an economist who are all considered notorious in the climate community. Meanwhile, the webpage that held the last properly written national climate assessment just went dark. Hey y'all, it's Becky here from the Beckosphere, where we talk about the climate crisis and clean energy transition. If those sound like interesting and important topics to you, hit the subscribe button below and ring the bell so you don't miss every time I post. A lot has happened on my end since the last time we spoke. If you're not interested in a quick life update from me, go ahead and skip to the timestamp that I'll put somewhere around here. So for those of you interested in the latest and that saw the latest video I posted a couple months ago, unfortunately the city I was an AmeriCorps fellow for was not able to hire me after the program was shut down by DOGE. Luckily for my program though, a few months ago the court sided with the states that sued the Trump administration for shutting down AmeriCorps programs, and so those 24 states that sued got their programs refunded. I bet the states that did not sue are feeling pretty silly right now. So I'm happy to say that the Sustainability Service Corps is back up and running in California, and if you are in California and you're looking for something like that, I highly recommend it, though it is at a reduced capacity thanks to the turmoil. That decision was announced literally the day after my program officially shut down, so I am back to looking for work. I am also still working on my master's program, which is going very well. I'm getting A's. But the biggest change is that Rue and I have moved across the country to live with my partner and his kitty Vetra. If you've been watching the fun facts about Rue since last winter, you'll remember Rue's adorable silver tabby sister because they met for the first time over Christmas break. So stay tuned for this video's fun fact at the end to see how they are getting along. But as for my partner and I, we're doing very well. This is the first time we're living together, so it's very exciting. We're both unemployed, but we're both doing our masters and we're both very happy. As a reminder, he's earning a nursing master's right now, so he's very busy. We're in the Great Lakes area, which is humid compared to California, and we've been getting a lot of wildfire smoke from Canada this summer. Not to mention we also got a once in 500 year flooding event, so that was fun. We're all okay. Thankfully, the part of the city that we live in was not as badly impacted, but it's never a dull moment in a more extreme climate future. If you want more details about how I'm doing, I actually started making monthly vlogs on my Patreon for the $5 to $10 monthly tiers. You can also individually purchase vlogs for $7. I also began doing weekly climate newsletters for all my patrons. So if you want more climate news stories that I consider important, you can sign up for that for as little as $3 a month. Of course, no pressure. Simply liking, commenting, and sharing my videos helps this channel a ton. So thank you so much for continuing to do that. Okay, now back to the Trump administration trying to gaslight all of us, because that is seriously what they are doing with this report. This report is meant to make us question our perception of reality. Because in reality, the Midwest didn't see poor air quality every year from Canada's boreal forests burning because they used to not burn like this. In reality, homes in the Pacific Northwest weren't built with air conditioning because it used to not get hot enough there to need it. And in reality, people didn't have to practically swim their way out of the New York subway systems multiple times a year. It just seems to me that if things were always this way, that the infrastructure would have been set up differently, don't you think? But hold on, isn't it possible that all of the scientists in the past reports colluded together to over-exaggerate the impacts of fossil fuel-based greenhouse gases? Why would they do that? I mean, it must be like a cabal of scientists that are all individually funded by different sources, but they're somehow colluding together to shit on progress and to keep the public controlled because scientists like controlled variables. I mean, Chris Wright, the current head of the Department of Energy, said in the Secretary Forward of the National Climate Report, the rise of human flourishing over the past 2 centuries is a story worth celebrating. Yet we are told relentlessly that the very energy systems that enable this progress now pose an existential threat. Hydrocarbon-based fuels, the argument goes, must be rapidly abandoned or else we risk planetary ruin. That view demands scrutiny. That's why I commissioned this report. Yes, very noble. So obviously he believes all the previous reports were just published to poo-poo on progress, and it's his job to correct the record. It has nothing to do with the fact that he is a CEO of fracking companies, so moving away from fossil fuels would hurt his bottom line. Wright commissioned 5 people known in the climate community for being cherry picker skeptics. I'll go over each of their credentials in a sec, but first, let me give you a quick summary of the main arguments of this document. Feel free to read it and the critical commentary that covers it. I linked all of that in the description below. I recommend that you look on the screen because I will be visually debunking all of these claims really quick as I go through them. I want to give a huge shout out to the more than 85 climate experts who have since come out to refute different parts of the Department of Energy's reports, and also the Carbon Brief fact-checking huge document that I'm using to fact-check a lot of these claims. The document basically provides quotes from a lot of the international group of scientists that either personally had their work misquoted or misreferenced or are experts in the particular subjects that are being discussed and are fact-checking those topics. So a lot of the things that you will see are quotes from the scientific community. A lot of them are American scientists or scientists from different parts of the world, like in Europe and Asia, that are all coming to say that these concepts are either misleading or flat out false. So there you have it. Enjoy. Carbon dioxide does not qualify as a critical air pollutant that can be regulated under the Clean Air Act. I'll actually go more into this argument later in this video. CO2 benefits the planet because plants like it. Yes, coral reefs might die, but most other things are used to a wide range of pHs, and we saw the Great Barrier Reef grow one year. Humans are a factor on the climate, but the international climate reports downplay the effect of the sun's variable rays. Climate projections based on the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's reports have exceeded observed trends. Studies that project the impact of future warming usually use the most extreme trajectory, being dramatic. For the record, the IPCC is considered the gold standard of climate science and is a collaboration between thousands of international scientists. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has risen, but it will just cause the world to get greener, which will then suck up more carbon. Also, most models show higher temperatures because they didn't take into effect that cities are warmer. We still don't know how much the Earth is going to heat up in the long term due to tipping points being reached, known as equilibrium climate sensitivity. The IPCC's method of determining this is flawed, and they underestimate how much greenhouse gases the planet can take without shifting into a new state of equilibrium. Climate models overall overestimate warming and are not perfectly accurate in certain areas, so they shouldn't be taken seriously. Most extreme weather events don't show any long-term pattern, except for maybe some extreme rain events over the short term, and maybe some wildfires have burned more than they used to, but the difference is negligible. Wildfire activity increases are mainly due to poor forest management practices. They love to use the forest management practices argument, don't they? The global sea level has risen by 8 inches, and any issues different coastal communities are experiencing are not due to sea level rise, but to ocean circulation patterns and cities sinking. Future sea level rise will be minimal, and most projections are over-exaggerating. Studies that determine how much climate change impacted a particular extreme weather event, known as attribution studies, are debatable. Also, IPCC assessments underestimate how much the Earth's climate naturally changes, how much the sun's radiation changes, how much air pollutants impact things, and how they do their attribution studies. Rising CO2 benefits agriculture and should be accredited for increasing yield. We can adapt our way out of climate change impacts. Economists don't see climate change as a big deal. Lessening climate change impacts is not a good enough reason to change how we manage our economy. Estimating how much climate change impacts should be added to the cost of doing something, aka the social cost of carbon, is too hard and unhelpful. Nothing US policy will do will impact climate change. Nothing that we've tried has impacted climate change. Anything we could do will take too long to impact anything to matter. So let me know which of these arguments was the most ridiculous to you down in the comment section below. If you have any genuine questions about any of these points, please feel free to ask them below. Everybody, be respectful in the comments. You know, everybody has different levels of understanding of this topic, and obviously, like, people keep using these points because they are effective to confuse folks, right? One of the authors of this report, Judith Curry, who I will talk about in a bit, wrote in her blog that she hoped that the report would redirect climate science, quote, away from alarmism and advocacy. No, not advocacy. Oh no. God forbid. I agree with Texas A&M University climate scientist Andrew Dessner, who commented on Bluesky that it amounts to a law brief from attorneys defending their client, which is carbon dioxide. Their goal is not to weigh the evidence fairly, but to build the strongest possible case for carbon dioxide's innocence. This is a fundamental departure from the norms of science. And unsurprisingly, several climate scientists whose work was referenced in the assessment have already come out to say that their research was misused or misrepresented. A few of the points made in this report are real areas of improvement for climate science, but saying that the community doesn't know about them is disingenuous. Like, I'm a climate nerd on YouTube, and I could have told you that we are still actively learning more about how air pollution impacts warming on regional extreme weather events. It's just a lot of whataboutism for the sake of it, as if asking the question shows that it's never been thought of before, but it has. We've understood the basic climate science since the 1970s, when ExxonMobil's climate scientists made accurate predictions. You know, the ones that were funded by fossil fuels but still came to the same results. The thing to remember is, the longer that we study this hugely complex issue, the more variables we realize we need to take into account, but also the closer we get to viewing the bigger picture in all of its complexity. So, what about those 5 authors that commissioned the report? Let's go ahead and look at those authors who believe that they clearly know more than the global scientific consensus, shall we? First up, Dr. John Christie. He has a PhD in atmospheric science and works as a professor in that field at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. He sees continuing carbon-based energy as a moral imperative, telling a local Alabama newspaper in 2016, quote, "We are not morally bad people for taking carbon and turning it into the energy that offers life to humanity in a world that would otherwise be brutal. Think of life before modernity. In the contrary, we are good people for doing so." What is this argument? I don't know anyone who says the initial move from burning wood to burning fossil fuels was morally wrong. Now, convincing the public to refuse the latest innovations that reduce harm to themselves and the environment, that's morally wrong, and something Christie has been doing since the early 2000s, testifying numerous times against the scientific consensus in front of different congressional committees over the years. Christie often works with another author from the DOE Report, Dr. Roy Spencer. Spencer is a climate researcher also at the University of Alabama. Something in the water in Alabama, I guess. Together, they created an infamous satellite temperature record back in the 1990s based on 2 orbiting satellites' data. This dataset's results differed from most climate findings because it found the Earth was cooling instead of warming initially. Within a few years of their research being published, 2 sets of researchers published reviews of their work, citing major errors in their methodology. And then when they actually went back to do it, they did manage to find that the Earth was slightly warming. Yet these 2 continue to spout claims to this day that the world's climate researchers are over-exaggerating the claims. Also, apparently we don't talk enough about all the good climate change can do. One of the main arguments that Christie and Spencer use to justify the continuation of fossil fuel use is that more CO2 actually produces more planetary productivity. They cite the increase of agricultural yield over the past several decades to support that. The agricultural yield increase has more to do with the increase in fertilizer use, improvement in farming techniques, and genetic modification. And actually, we're already seeing agricultural yields be impacted by climate change-induced extreme weather events more every year. Additionally, there is a point where too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere reduces vegetation yield. I feel like refuting this DOE report would be a great assignment for environmental studies bachelor students because it's not hard, but it is good to know like basic climate denialist arguments. It's unsurprising that Spencer is an author of this report because he is cited by Politico as one of the top 4 most influential people behind the DOE director's climate policy moves. Also, Spencer is an advisor for the Heartland Institute and served as a visiting fellow for the Heritage Foundation, which are 2 extremely influential fossil fuel funded right-wing think tanks, the latter of which is the brains behind Project 2025, which is absolutely going in effect now. Like, there is literally no question. But it's not Spencer who has compromised influences. No. It's hundreds of climate scientists from around the world working for vastly different governments, NGOs, and for-profit companies that have been corrupted. Right, we need to keep that straight. Now let's move on to the next author of the study, Dr. Judith Curry, who I have been wanting to talk about for years because she keeps showing up as the queen of climate skepticism. She's a climatologist and former professor at Georgia Tech before she left her position in 2017, citing the craziness of climate science. She's also the co-founder of the Climate Forecast Applications Network, a weather forecasting company. According to a 2022 deposition, most of Curry's clients are fossil fuel and utility companies. She has maintained a climate denialist blog, also called Climate Etc., and regularly makes her rounds in the climate skeptic corners of the internet. She has also testified in front of Congress against climate change action many times. And then there's Dr. Steve Koonin, a theoretical physicist who worked as a chief scientist for the oil giant BP before working in the Department of Energy under the Obama administration. Thanks, Obama. He claims that climate science is still unsettled, hence the name of his 2021 book, which I had the displeasure of finding in a gift shop at a national park in California. Why the heck was that book there? Are we still trying to do the both sides thing? He was also the feature expert on the 2021 PragerU video, Is There Really a Climate Emergency? Hint, he doesn't think there really is one. Also, apparently PragerU is going to be the new PBS in the United States. Awesome. The last author in the report to talk about is Dr. Ross McKittrick, who is an associate professor in economics at the University of Guelph in Canada and a senior fellow at the libertarian think tank Fraser Institute. He denies that carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases are pollutants and argues that the cost of climate policies far exceeds the cost of doing nothing, a statement that completely contradicts what the vast majority of economists say. It seems like the assessment was able to be pulled together so fast because all the contributors just put down the arguments they've said over and over again for the last 20 years. Just, copy, paste. Speaking of considering carbon dioxide a pollutant, let's talk about that first segment of the assessment. In my opinion, this part of the assessment is the point of the creation of it, undermining the endangerment finding of the Clean Air Act. The rest of the assessment was more of a big middle finger to the climate science community. It might also strengthen policy moves Trump wants to make because now he has something to point to. Trump also seems interested in attempting to alter past climate reports, though I have no idea what that would entail. You're probably thinking, what the hell is an endangerment finding, Becky? The endangerment finding added greenhouse gases to a list of pollutants the EPA can regulate under the Clean Air Act. So hypothetically then, it should be able to limit how much CO2 power plants and automobile tailpipes can emit. But the literal first chapter of the DOE report refutes carbon dioxide as a pollutant that the EPA can regulate, stating that it doesn't impact local air quality and has no human toxicological implications at ambient levels like the other chemicals on the critical air pollutants list. However, in my opinion, the criteria for the air pollutants is that they impact human health and the environment, which carbon dioxide has been shown over time to do. And while breathing CO2 directly doesn't impact humans, the emissions of them absolutely does. That's just something that the assessment authors don't believe. Now, obviously, climate polluting industries and sympathizers would love for the EPA not to have any control over regulating greenhouse gases. Overturning the endangerment finding was a key feature in the Project 2025 agenda. The EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin acts like he's interested in reducing carbon emissions over time still, but if he thinks what regulations were in place so far was already too much, even though it's very much too little, then he probably won't employ anything special. Also, he has no qualifications to be in charge of the EPA, but I digress. Without these regulations, the rate at which sectors decarbonize will slow, which is literally the last thing we need right now. The endangerment finding is really unambiguous in the law, so it should really take an act of Congress to legally get it overturned. Of course, environmental groups are already preparing to challenge the Trump administration if it goes through with repealing the endangerment finding. It was just announced that the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, the nation's premier group of science advisors, will fund its own review of the endangerment finding and the impact of repealing it. That fast-tracked report is expected to come out next month, so we'll see what they have to say and how much impact that will actually have on the administration doing anything. This is all interesting, you say, but what can I do to make a difference on this issue? The first step is to just find a part of the climate issue that you care about and either learn more about it or find a group that cares about it to work on local projects with. In this political climate, local action makes a big difference. If you want some examples, check out a video I did earlier this year on climate wins. It's time for a fun fact about Rue. So, Rue did his first flight. He didn't like it. He was very quiet, he was very well behaved. I got so many compliments on how good of a boy he was. But the landing of the first flight, because it was 2 flights and split with a little bit of a layover, the landing was really rough for him, and so the poor boy shot himself in the carrier. And so then thankfully the layover was extended a bit because the next flight was delayed, and so I was able to clean it up a little bit before the rest of the flight. So that was the main issue. And then we also had a bit of trouble reinvigorating the cats towards each other, because even though they kind of knew each other, they acted like they didn't. It was a stressful situation for Rue because he had just flown and stuff, and so we used the little pheromone things that you get from Petco that you plug into the wall, and those are amazing. It changed their personalities night to day, and now they're really close. They're best buds and they play all the time, and so that's been really exciting to see. So yeah. I have so many new fun facts about Rue, and also through the fun facts about Rue, I will share also some more fun facts about Vetra. But until next time, that was a fun fact about Rue. Until next time, remember to talk about the climate crisis every single day and to support your local news and environmental organizations. Lord knows they need it right now. Thank you so much to the Beccaspherians who support my work on Patreon. A special shout out to the climate confident and courageous David H., Phil Plasma, Dan Morton, Specker, Bree C., Deanne, Kevin Morton, SKP, Joe Korsgold, and Gary Stark. I greatly appreciate your support of $5 or more. If you would like to support the Beccasphere, please check out the Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links in the description below for reoccurring or one-time payments. Bye for now.